Welcome to all of you. This is our third discussion in a four-part series for ECU's 6th Annual Civility Summit, North Carolina Civility Summit, as we call it. I'll share with you a little bit about that program in a second by way of introduction. Just want to say welcome. I'm Dennis McCunney. Use he, him pronouns. I serve as Director of Intercultural Affairs here at East Carolina University within Student Affairs. I'm joined by some colleagues here today as well from ECU. Let us just to get us started, and apologies to those of you who've been at the first couple of sessions. This will be a repeat. But let me just get us started with a brief overview of this summit, this program, and share a few goals of the program. So this summit, the Civility Summit as it's called, provides opportunities for students, faculty, staff, community partners, and community members from the state, region, and now the globe to engage in conversations about civility and how that topic intersects with other topics such as activism, race, politics, sexual orientation, gender, global affairs, etc. So the overarching goal for the event is for these conversations to fuel our desires to make changes in ourselves toward positive social change, to help all of us think about what it means to be change agents. So some of our goals and learning outcomes include promoting democratic values within our campus community, encouraging unity in the face of public divisiveness, honoring active citizenship as a daily practice and inspirational goal, encouraging participants to creatively engage in constructive conflict, and then also to promote steady, loving confrontation, as Dr. King mentioned with his definition of nonviolence, steady, loving confrontation to promote a more just and equitable world. So like I mentioned, this is our 6th annual summit, and typically we've had kind of keynote speakers and tried to do kind of a mini conference each year. Happens around February, March each year. This year we decided to solicit input from some of our global partners to engage with the topic of building peace after conflict. And perhaps a more apt title would be Building Peace Within and Among Conflict, as conflict seems ever present in our social and political realities. So for all of us in the US, as you know, it's been a difficult and exhausting year, and in some ways continues into 2021. After a divisive and tragic summer of violence and racial injustice, as well as a charged election season culminating in extremist acts of violence at the US Capitol, on top of the serious public health issues brought on by that pandemic. In many ways, many of us feel as if our social fabric is torn and tattered. Questions like, how do we heal? How do we move forward? How do we rely on our deeply held democratic principles to get us through? These are all salient questions that we should and have been asking. So if you look at our Civility Summit website, and I'll post a link to that in a second, we've been offering through our great partners at Amizade, based in Pittsburgh, we've been offering 4 different sessions over the past few weeks. This is our 3rd, next week will be our 4th, addressing this topic with some guest speakers from around the globe. We value their perspectives and experiences within their own local contexts, and how that'll shed light on this topic that we're all discussing today. So we encourage you to mark your calendar for the 4th session if you're able to join us next Wednesday, same time, same place, as we wrap up the summit. I want to thank our partners, or my colleagues from ECU who helped pull this off, in addition to Amizade, so Katie Locke, Sean Simon, Tara Kermit, for helping to put these details together. If you have, I will note as well that we'll post video recordings of these conversations on our website. If you can't join all 4 of these, they will be available for download. So check that out, and they will be linked soon. But if you have questions or feedback, feel free to reach out to myself or Katie or Tara. So that's my little introductory spiel. And with that, I will pass it off to Nick. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Dennis. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, can everybody see that? Okay, great. All right, so thank you everyone for joining us for this 3rd session. So about a little over a year ago, the world was thrown into turmoil, and we at Amizade had to pivot from in-person learning experiences to virtual. And over the course of the last year, we've refined the recipe of what a good virtual learning experience looks like. Today, we're really going to focus on the compelling story aspect, real human interactions and inspiration, and the action aspect, reflective, interactive group activity, and some concrete things that we can do about it at the end. We got a little bit of the nerd stuff last week. I don't want to use that like as a negative context. It was great nerd stuff from Dr. Matthias Haas from Germany. So we like the nerd stuff. Maybe we should find another term for nerd stuff, Brandon. So who is Amizade? So first of all, Amizade is the Portuguese word for friendship. We were founded in Brazil over 27 years ago now, I believe it is. So we're a 27-year-old nonprofit organization based in Pittsburgh. We work with education partners around the world in over 20 communities. We do 3 things. We bring diverse groups of people together, inspire empathy and civic engagement, and catalyze social action together. We organize study abroad programs and virtual experiences that focus on climate change, anti-racism, ending extremism, community development. And it's also worth noting that we have UN consultative status. We work with government agencies, do corporate social responsibility work, and have over 26,000 alums. So a recap of our previous week. So first week was with our friends in Belfast, Northern Ireland. We considered the rise of extremism in the US through the lens of folks who are on the opposite sides of the Troubles. We heard stories about the Troubles and linkages between poverty and extremism, and we introduced the trends of misinformation used to spread hate. Last week, again, we had Dr. Matthias Haas from Berlin, Germany. We learned about the key figures involved in the creation of the final solution to the Jewish question. We explored the denazification of Germany after World War II and the struggle to accept familial responsibility. We also discussed ways in which the victims of the Holocaust were memorialized while the perpetrators were held accountable. And for today's event, so we'll spend about an hour with our featured speakers. So we've got Leah, Keller, and Milton from Pine Ridge Reservation with us today. After that hour, we'll have about 15 minutes, hopefully, in breakout rooms, sort of imagining our place in creating peace in our own communities. And then finally, we'll reconvene, open it up for questions and final thoughts. Feel free to use the chat box for any questions or comments that you have along the way. So without further introduction, I give you Leah and Keller, our site directors for Pine Ridge.
Good morning, everyone. It's really nice to see you. I'm Keller Allen, and this is my wife, Leah Mutz. We're really pleased to be joining you today, and just want to give thanks to Amizade and ECU for hosting us, and to say thanks to Milton for joining us. I'll give you just a little bit of background on our projects, and then I'll pass it along to my wife, Leah, to introduce Milton. So Leah and I moved to Pine Ridge Reservation. We spent about 6 months out of the year there each year, and we've started various initiatives with our partners there, with Milton and his family. We do food sovereignty initiatives where we help to grow food for the local population. It's a food desert there. It's really hard to come by fresh, nutritious, organic foods. So we've been engaged with that, as well as some housing initiatives, helping to build homes and upkeep homes to keep it warm for the winter season, do some fundraising, resource development, things like that. And then about 4 years ago, we started partnering with Amizade, and it's been a really great, amazing partnership. We've had Amizade help to send students to us, so we host service learning groups. Students come in and volunteer, learn a lot about the culture, do some cultural experiences, take in a sweat lodge, different things like that. And we're really excited to be here with you today, looking at some big questions of extremism and growing up. A lot of what I learned about in extremism had to do with like what was happening in the Middle East or in Northern Africa or in different parts of the world. And so it's nice to have some time to bring the focus closer to home and kind of look at the ways that the American government has sponsored some pretty extreme views. There are still American soldiers with awards of honor for having perpetrated massacres on the people who I'm friends and family with here in Pine Ridge. And so I'm humbled to be introducing Milton, and am excited to hear a bit more from the inside of what it's been like for Milton and his people to be coming up against such a powerful organization as the American government for this long. So I'll pass that over to my wife Leah, and she can take it from there.
Hi everybody. I'm really grateful to be here today. Thanks very much for having us, and thanks for all the folks who are in place to make this conversation happen. So I'm not going to talk for long. I'm going to hand it over to Milton pretty quickly, but I just wanted to say a few words. I had the real gift of being on the call last week when Matthias was speaking. He is a Holocaust historian, and I was so struck. He's an excellent speaker. I really enjoyed being on the call. And one thing that really struck me is as he was talking about the time after the war, he made reference to, and then of course the signs came down. He spoke about the street signs, the streets that were named after Hitler and other Nazis, and the street signs coming down, and the statues coming down. And he made reference to his country dealing with its past. And that just stayed with me. That stayed with me all week because, in so many ways, our country hasn't taken down the signs, and the statues are still up. And we've got Mount Rushmore in the Black Hills is one of the most visited parks in the nation, and Custer National Park just south of it. And I think in so many ways, our government is not even aware that there is reconciliation work to be done in Indian country. Like that is not even a real basic acknowledgement that they have made at this point. And so this state-sponsored extremism, which is our topic for today, continues without that recognition and that understanding of the need for reconciliation. That kind of extremism and terrorism as sponsored by the state is allowed to continue. So that all having been said, it is my real joy to introduce our friend Milton, and he's going to talk with us a bit about like what it looks like to survive that kind of extremism for many generations and resist that kind of state-sponsored terrorism, and what that all looks like on Pine Ridge these days. So with that, Milton, thanks so much for being here, and I'll hand it over to you.
There we go again. Oh, got it. I think. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're on now.
All right. Well, I want to thank Keller and everybody. I'd like to say that word, but I wrote it down, and I'm like sitting here trying to say it, but my tongue is tied on that word. How you say that? Amizade. But anyway, I want to thank everybody for giving me this opportunity and time, to talk about, life experiences and being in the belly of the beast here among everything that's been talked about. And, I grew up on the Wind River Indian Reservation. My mother was a Shoshone Indian on the Wind River there in Wyoming. And my dad is from here on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And to be identified and to be acknowledged by the federal government, you have to be an enrolled member. with a certain amount of blood degree. And so my dad at that time took it upon himself to claim me and gave me a U number down here on Pine Ridge. So I'm an enrolled and recognized member of a federally recognized tribe down here on Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, which then opens the door for me to allow me to get all the free stuff in the world, you know, free money, free housing, free stuff like that. But no, I'm just kidding. That's just that's just what people think. You know, people think that. But so anyway, when I was growing up, I guess I never really thought about, you know, racism or extremism. You know, even that word just came into probably within the last few years. You know, I finally heard that word. You know, and I'm like, wow. You know, and the language and everything coming out of that, you know, is like, you know, kind of, you know, in a sense, I was kind of concerned, but I wasn't. But when I was growing up, I was raised by my grandma and grandpa. We lived in a small house, you know, out in the country, you know, and we didn't have running water. We didn't have toilets or anything like that. You know, I have a lot of stories behind that. And I still remember today, and sometimes I pass it on to my grandkids, you know, about things, how it used to be, you know, how things were then, you know, but I grew up, you know, being raised by them. You know, they had their, you know, traditional values, you know, and my grandfather, later on, who was a World War II vet, ended up, you know, kind of living in both worlds and kind of, without me realizing it, you know, was kind of pulling us into those worlds, you know, from Christianity, you know, to, you know, our traditional way, you know, of prayer. And but one thing I did realize one time was we were in a store. Those of you that are old enough, I don't know if you remember those stores called Ben Franklin, the 5 and dime stores. But anyway, I was in there one time and I was just walking around looking, and I was checking out some, you know, some candy, of course, you know, grabbing them, looking at them. And this lady came up to me and just boom, slapped my hand. Told me, you know, don't be touching things. You know, if you're not gonna buy it, don't be touching it. So I looked at her and she was standing there and had this really, you know, mean look on her face. And so I stood there and my grandma, you know, told me in Shoshone to come over by her and stay by her. And so then, you know, I told my grandma later on, how come she's mean? You know, why'd she hit me? You know, why'd she do that? And she said, well, you know, there are some people that you're going to run into that's going to be doing a lot of that. You know, sometimes they don't like us. And I couldn't understand that then. And I remember that. Then one time, I and my friend, we went to a movie in Lander, Wyoming, and we went to a movie, and my grandfather was there, and he went down to go pick up his friend just right down the block there, you know, who was in the bar. And we got done and we were standing around waiting for my grandfather to show up to pick us up, and we noticed a commotion down there, and we went down there, and there was these, you know, I don't want to offend anybody. I don't even know what to say nowadays because everybody gets offended by so much things. You know, back then, you know, when we were growing up, you know, we're like, okay, move on, you know. And there was these white guys, they were out there, and then I noticed that these guys that they were fighting or beating up on, one was my grandpa, and they're hitting him and kicking him, and the other guy, and you know, I just started screaming. Me and my friend, we just kind of, you know, kind of lost it. You know, we didn't know what was going on, and he finally got up. They grabbed him, threw him, got in the car. They're all bloody, beat up, and we're going, and they were saying all these things, you know, these things that, you know, I've never heard, you know, for a long time, and you know, all these derogatory names towards us and everything. We start heading out of town, and so that was my first experience, you know, with, you know, these things that, you know, people are really experiencing today, you know, and back then, you know, it was, we never thought about it. We just, you know, moved on again, you know, but at that time, then I started to associate, you know, people, you know, in these places with, you know, being violent, being, they didn't like you, they hated you, you know, so you kind of stayed away from it. And so I kind of stayed away from town a lot after that, you know, and just only went in town, you know, to get certain things and, you know, and go back out, and didn't really expose myself into the stores or anything like that. And as I moved on, you know, and end up, you know, going into, you know, boarding school, you know, down here in South Dakota, then we kind of got a little bit more experience from what talking about racism moving forward. In boarding school, you get to meet people from all over the country, a lot of other Native kids from every part of the country, United States. They bring them there, and you know, we all, you know, it's a BIA, you know, government run boarding school. And then it was there where I got to meet, you know, there's other people, I guess, that are more advanced in this area than a lot of us was as far as racism. I never even heard that word either, you know. You know, racism was more like, you know, oh, they don't like us. That was our term. That was our definition of racism. They don't like us, you know. The whites, they don't like Indians. That was our definition. But we never heard the word racism or racist, you know, then, or even with the other word bigot or anything like that, you know. So we just said, you know, they don't like us, you know, whites don't like Indians, things like that. And then I met some people at the boarding school that, you know, one of them was he was from Chicago, Illinois, you know, and he had really long hair, and the way he talked, you know, was like, yeah, we got to stand up for our rights. We got to stand up as natives, as Indians, you know, we got to stand up. We got to can't let these people push us around, call us all this dirty stuff. And we just got to stop, you know, letting them, you know, stomp on us. We got to rise, you know, we're the first people of this country, you know, they should recognize us. And this was at boarding school. And so we used to go to this theater downtown in Flandreau. And one time we're sitting there, and this guy used to walk up and down the aisles with this flashlight, just flash it on us, all the Indians kids from the boarding school, and he'd just flash it, you know. And I never could understand why he would be doing that, you know. He wouldn't let us watch the movie, just constantly going one down the aisle. Finally, you know, my buddy, you know, his name was Charles, and he stood up, and so, we're getting tired of you with this flashlight, you know, we're here, we paid good money to be in here, we're eating your popcorn, and next you know, we're getting kicked out of the theater. You know, we're like, I go out, he says, man, this is bum, you know. He goes up, throws his bag of popcorn at the theater, and we took off running, you know. And so then it was, my experience was like, you know, what is this, you know, this guy really does have something, the way he was talking and things. And so I kind of got introduced in, you know, in a sense that way, you know, and start thinking about, you know, who are we really? You know, why are we being treated like this? You know, why, you know, why is things happening the way it is? And from there, you know, I went into the military, and there, you know, it was, I never thought about it, but it was always, for, you know, they had, you know, there's certain, you know, I guess nicknames, you know, for the blacks, the Hispanics in there back then in early 80s. And for us, the Indians or Native Americans, you know, didn't matter who you were, we were chief, you know. Hey chief, get over here. Hey chief, get over here and get this done. Hey chief, you know. Until with the point we were calling each other, you know, the enlisted members were, you know, referring each other, you know, by, you know, the word, you know, the blacks didn't want to hear was the one, you know, people don't want to hear, but, you know, and Hispanics and stuff. But, and finally I sat back and I thought about it when I started hearing this word chief. It never bothered me in the beginning, you know, okay, because I thought, and the way I believed is that a chief, if you all know about a chief of a tribe. He's the baddest dude. He runs the tribe. He's the top man. You know, he's the go-to guy. He knows when you're going to go to war, stay out of war. He knows when the buffalo are moving. He knows when you got to go camp somewhere. He makes all the decisions, this chief. So that's why I looked at him like, you know, man, these guys are cool, man. You know, call me a chief here, you know. You know, so to me, it was like, I have an honor, but to them, they were degrading me. But I didn't see it that way, you know. So finally, one of my black friends was sitting in a room and says, he always, you know, he said, yo, chief. I says, how come you never get mad when we call you chief? And so I told him why. And he looked at me and says, really? And I said, yeah, that's what a chief is. And he thought about it. But I hate the word they call you guys, though. You know, I don't want to be where you're at. And he sat there, he thought about it, and he liked it. And, you know, and so that was my first explanation of being called names, you know, and it was constant, you know, it was always there, you know, in the military, you know, and, you know, they, you know, put you, you know, have them guys go clean that out over there, then clean the bathrooms over there, let them go do, you know, but, you know, you never, you know, I never thought about it. I just did it, you know. And then I think where I really start getting a taste of I guess, the rights of Native Americans is when I took some college courses there in Central Wyoming, you know, Central Wyoming College, took some courses, and I didn't know what to take, you know, until the school counselor there says, well, she started from A, B, C, and I got down to C, and she said, this one here is criminal justice. And I said, well, what's that about? And it says about what the police can and can't do. And I like, sign me up. You know, what do I need to do? I need to get in these classes, you know. So anyway, I signed up for criminal justice, and it opened my eyes a lot about what was going on in the world. And my you know, my teacher, he was a really good guy. He, you know, he talked about his days in Greenwich Village and down in New York, walking the beat with just a stick and stuff like that, and talking about how his first line of defense was get to know people, you know, get to know them first, you know, get to know who they are, because one day they might have your back. And he gave us an example one time where he went into a few of the bars there on his beat where he was always walking his patrol, and he made friends with the biggest, baddest guys in those bars, you know, and even though they did wrong, he says, you know, he gave them slack. So when it came down a couple of times, he said he was in there to deal with some issues in a bar. These guys, you know, were trying to, you know, jump him. And the big guys, the bad guys in the bar jumped up and threw everybody off and protected him. And he says, you know, that's, you know, he was telling me that, you know, that's usually your first line of defense, is getting to know people and treat them with, you know, compassion, you know. And I like thought about that, and I said, no, that's pretty cool. And then when I got out, then I never thought about politics, you know. You know, when I came to South Dakota back in the early 90s, and I came down here during election time, and my uncle, you know, who I never really got to know, you know, I came down and stayed with him, and he says, let's go down and vote. And I was like, okay, vote for what? He said, we got to go vote for our council members. We got to vote the states. What are you? Are you Republican or Democrat? And I'm like, what's that? You know, honestly, I didn't even know what those were. Even in high school, I didn't know. Even when I took, you know, some political science stuff and all that, I'm like, what's a Republican? What's a Democrat? Well, all Indians are Democrats, so you're going to be registered as Democrat. So he took me down there and helped me go through the process of registering and all that. So I said, okay, I guess I'm a Democrat, I guess. But I never really knew what that was or what it is, you know. Today I'm more confused, you know, what these political organizations are all about anymore. I just don't understand them anymore. But anyway, here in South Dakota is where we really finally I got to understand, you know, about, you know, what it was like, you know, to be here and to live, you know, among, you know, in this reservation, you know, surrounded by, you know, a lot of things that go on here in South Dakota that has a real deep, dark history about how they interacted with Native Americans here, and primarily, the Sioux here on the reservations. And it's then that I started, really getting involved by reading an article one time on this guy. His last name was Yellow Thunder, and in the early 70s, he was working in Nebraska, just a little ways south of here, and working in Nebraska, and these ranchers picked him up, and they got him drunk and took him to the Legion, and they thought it would be fun to, strip him down naked and make him dance in front of everybody. And then later on, they took him out and killed him, and I saw that article, and I started digging more deeper into it, and I'm like, and then when I start reading about other issues that going on primarily in the early 70s here on Pine Ridge, I started reading a lot about, what was going on, and asking a lot of questions from people that were, having to deal with the government and the tribe internally itself, how it was turning on its people. And then I finally started getting a little taste of, activism about, who we are, what we need to do, what I need to do, to start standing up, to protect the rights, of our people, protect the rights and the sovereignty of our land, and everything that, that would encroach, our only land base we have left, the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And so I started reading a lot, started understanding a lot more about what was going on. And a friend of mine says, we can't go out, and put up our fist anymore and fight them the way, it used to be a long time ago, because, we're going to lose. So what we need to do is that we need to educate ourselves. We need to educate ourselves and to understand their laws, their policies. We need to understand, everything that they impose on us through the black and white, the ink, that they use as paper, to impose their rules or whatever they want upon us. Even our own tribe, they use the BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Indian Health Service, or healthcare. It's just like right now, I'm try to hold that thought there on that one, but how they impose this stuff. So we need to educate ourselves. We need to start reading and understanding, and then protecting ourselves and our families in that way. So I started doing that. I started doing a lot of reading, a lot of research from what I already knew already, and start, moving along and moving forward. And then lo and behold, one day somebody asked me to be, to join law enforcement. And so I joined law enforcement here in Pine Ridge, and that's where I really became a little more political in the area of protecting our sovereignty. Because, here on Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, the state of South Dakota, meaning the sheriff or the towns that are surround the reservation, or from anywhere on South Dakota, and the state patrol, the South Dakota State Patrol, cannot enter the reservation. Unlike most other reservations, they can go through, issue tickets, and you have to go pay in state court, blah, blah, blah. But here on Pine Ridge, after the 70s, after the uprising in the 70s of Wounded Knee, after that, a lot of things changed. And one of them was that, that the state could no longer come here on the reservation and start enforcing the laws or anything like that, And so as a result of that, the state patrol and other agencies were no longer, could come here on the reservation and patrol and enforce laws. And so as a police officer, that's what I really started getting into, is the jurisdiction, of our nation here, and the sovereignty of our tribe. And so I started getting into a lot of that, mainly, doing my job, but at the same time, I started reading a lot of the policies and of the U.S. government, the United States Attorney, the FBI, the U.S. Marshals. Then I started reading about the sheriff. Primarily there's a little town here called Bennett County, or Martin, but the county's Bennett County, which includes a lot of reservation land. And I started reading a lot about their stuff, their policies, their laws, and mainly was to protect, you know, the sovereignty of the reservation and to protect our people. And, you know, it's crazy. You know, I got in an altercation one time with the Bennett County Sheriff for the deputy. You know, we were in a scuffling match over him chasing the tribal member onto the reservation, and where I had to go and intervene, and apparently got into a wrestling match with the deputy and threw him around a little bit, you know. And he got mad and he was going to file charges on me, blah, blah, blah. And I told him, well, you only got 5 minutes to get off my reservation, or else, you know, I'm taking your car and I'm calling the FBI. Because, you know, we don't have jurisdiction. That's the other thing. We'll talk about jurisdictional issues. We didn't have jurisdiction over him, so I told him I wasn't call the FBI. You know, I know a good friend, man. He'll be down here. He's on call, and he'll take you in for coming on his reservation, assaulting one of our tribal members. You can't do that. And he kind of backed off. He says, well, just let me leave, you know. And I said, all right. So I let him go, and he got in his car and he left, you know. And so, you know, that without knowing and understanding and having that knowledge, I would have never done that. You know, I would have bowed down to the state authorities. Okay, do what you got to do, man, you know, because they're state, you know. But then I'm like, nah, this ain't gonna happen here on my reservation, on my, you know, my watch, you know. And so, you know, man, I jumped up there, and after he left all that, the other officer standing looking at me said, wow, did you just do that? And I said, hell yeah, man. And they're high-fiving me. Yeah, man, I tell them, we got to protect our land. They don't care, you know. So anyway, I asked this guy that they were chasing. I said, what? And he's sitting there scared. I said, well, what are they chasing you for? What the hell? You know, so he's a tribal member. He's a community member. I knew him. So I was, you know, telling him, what were they chasing you about? Man, look at this. Got us all in this big mess, but I ain't scared, you know. I said, well, what happened was me and my girlfriend, there's a local bar down the road, about 7 miles down the road in state jurisdiction. Him and his girlfriend got in a fight in the bar. So he got in his car and he took off. Nighttime. And right before he was turning up towards the housing, a car comes flying up behind him real fast without lights. And he thought it was his girlfriend chasing him down, so he took off. And it wasn't only then halfway the lights came on, and he said, I was already over here. So you know, so the story wasn't really fully told until later on. The issue came up again. But the protection of the jurisdiction of our tribe and understanding more and more about, you know, about everything else that start to come about, you know, such as Miniwachoni, the water, you know, uranium, you know, these type of things, you know, and mainly, you know, understanding that process where, you know, if you go stand on a line, protest line, then understand what your rights are when you're doing that, you know, understand, you know, what you can and can't do or be said, you know. So you know, that's one of the things that I really started looking into, but at the same time, you know, making sure that the voice is heard. Now, when I said hold that thought, we talked about, you know, how the government, you know, is basically oversees each and every one of us here on the federally recognized members of this reservation, oversees, you know, how we act, how we live, how their policies are going to apply to us, and their policies is not, you know, here to protect the health and welfare of our people. Meaning, let's say let's start with law enforcement, you know, because I was pretty, you know, knowledgeable in the area. Let's start with law enforcement. Prior to I think 75, somewhere in that area, the BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, which is under the government, U.S. government, you know, enforced all the laws here in Pine Ridge. And a lot of the laws that they adopted, that they were following, a lot of them were federal laws, meaning you could get arrested for something and go to federal court, you know, and get found guilty and go to federal prison, you know. It still happens to this day. One of the examples I'll give you one time is that I made a vehicle stop and this guy had a federal warrant. I said, oh man, you got a federal warrant, man. He's federal warrant for what, you know? And I said, I don't know. We'll have to get to the jail and find out. So I arrested him, took him to the jail on a federal warrant, and then I got the facts from the FBI. And you know what his warrant was for? Littering. Littering. He was on the Badlands National Park Forest, Badlands National Park, and there's an area there on the river where they, you know, the tribal members, it's on the reservation, but they go there, you know, they have their little barbecues, sometimes they drink their beer. And so he was down there. He remembered one time now when he pulled down there, the Park Service guy, you know, these guys saw him coming, so he threw his beer into the river, hoping it would float, you know, float away, but it didn't because it was low. And so they charged him for that. And he, you know, and he was supposed to go pay $40, you know, but he never did, and he got the federal warrant. So, you know, so then, you know, I don't know if that was on his record or not, but you know, that those are some of the things. But being in law enforcement, to understand, you know, the federal government, the state government, and how they apply, you know, their jurisdiction. Prior to that, going back prior, it was BIA. But after the 70s, after Wounded Knee in the 70s, the new tribal government came in and said, you know what, you know, the BIA law enforcement, you know, wasn't doing us any good. They were helping the U.S. government, you know, impose their rules and trying to, you know, put all these charges on our people, and they never helped us out, you know. And so what they did was that the 638 self-determined nation, what they did is 638 law enforcement took it from the BIA federal and made it a tribal organization, made it a tribal law enforcement, and then developed all their laws behind it. You know, bringing some of the federal laws that were in the 25 CFR, brought some of it and put it in our tribal laws, where it became a tribal situation. Now you didn't have to get charged with federal laws or anything like that. So we, self-determination, in other words, you know, we take care of our own law enforcement. So that's a good example where we, you know, took that from the BIA and then made it, you know, tribal law enforcement, you know, which is good, you know, in a sense. But when you step out of there and you start having to deal with the different jurisdictions, depending on the violation, is that, you know, we have to deal with, you know, state jurisdiction, we have to deal with, you know, the federal jurisdiction, and we have to deal with the tribal jurisdiction, depending on the nature of the crime that's been committed and who committed it. So it's like this, let's say this, you guys, each and every one of you guys right here, you know, you can come to the Pioneer Virginia Reservation as an example. I don't know if any of you guys drink or not, but, you know, and you come to my place while I'm on state ground. But if you come on tribal land and you come, we all sit there and we pop open the cooler, we stand there and we start throwing down some suds, you know, some cold ones, start talking, and a tribal police shows up. None of you guys are going. I'm going to jail, you know. So that's how the jurisdiction works here, you know. So, you know, they will tell you guys, well, you just better leave, because the sheriff ain't going to waste his time coming out there taking beer away from you guys, you know, and then having to spend his money to haul you to jail. You know, he's just going to say, get out of here, spill your beer, while I go to jail, you know, because Pine Ridge is a dry reservation. You can't drink or have alcohol, possess any of that here at all. So, but we have to be understandable and knowledgeable in all those areas as a tribal law enforcement, you know. So we kind of like, you know, the Band-Aid that fixes all. You know, recently, you know, we had the BIA investigators that investigate major crimes meaning, you know, murder, rape, you know, child abuse, you know, those fall into major crimes. So what'll happen, someone gets charged and identifies major crimes, the tribal court will hold off on it, and then the federal court will take over and then prosecute it through. And so, but then you have a different degree of people that investigate that, who are especially law enforcement commission certified by the federal government, identifying them as a federal agent of the government. And so, just if you don't have that commission, then you can't introduce cases to the federal government, the FBI, U.S. Attorney's Office. You can be a witness to it, but you can't be a part of it. But there's a process, that you can be an agent. So that's another process. So, if we had a car wreck, most of you guys, if you're an offender bender, even in Rapid City, they get their crash investigators to come and show up. They do the crash investigation. Here on reservation, we do all that too. So, with law enforcement, then we begin to start, looking at, as law enforcement, as chief of police and other leaders, is that how do we protect the sovereignty of the reservation? How do we protect the sovereignty of, of this tribe? Well, as the chief of police, he's the one that's going to make a lot of those decisions. He has to work with the tribal government to ensure that, the integrity of our piece is protected. And it could, the tribe can, back him or not back him, or enact, their policies or whatever they want to do, specific to whatever's going on out there. So the other part that I really have a big beef with, we all have, everybody is going to go see the doctor at one time or another. I'm talking about medical now here on the reservation. I'm going to talk about medical. We have a program here called the Indian Health Service, who is run by the government, not by the tribe. And the example I'm going to give is this COVID that happened and how it was addressed here on Pine Ridge based upon, what I know. And with the vaccines going out, well, the tribe, they developed a task force to get out the information, do all this, do all that, to prevent the COVID from coming to the reservation. Well, what happened was, when that first happened, a young lady from one of the schools in Porcupine, her and her husband went to California, and they came back and they ended up testing positive for the COVID. So what did the tribe do? They all voted to boot them off the reservation. So the tribal council voted and booted them off the reservation. And I don't know if they were, I don't know if they ever got to come back or not, but they booted them. And that was their answer on handling people that was bringing COVID to the reservation, because we were looking south to Navajo, who took a big hit on fatalities and, the numbers of who were positive. And so what they did was then booted them off, and then, put these roadblocks up. And that became an issue. Roadblocks became an issue by the governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem. She had an issue with these roadblocks on the reservation because people that were living on the reservation, primarily ranchers, were crying around to her, probably, voting people of what her stance was on. And then so she had a rancher herself had a big cow about it, and started attacking the tribes on, these roadblocks that we're putting up to do prevention of, having the virus come into the reservation. Because here on the reservation, we don't have much housing. That's another area of housing, man. I go on about a lot of stuff here. But housing, we don't have much housing and stuff. And if we do, a lot of them are boarded up, which people could live in, but they're not. They're boarded up because the government doesn't give them enough funding to maintain these houses, to get them back up so they can move families in. So they just let them sit there. And man, I've seen, there's houses right down the road here I've seen boarded up for like 5 years now. Imagine what my family could do with that house. Man, it's a 5-bedroom house. Now the pipes are probably bad. The mice probably been in there. Now the whole building's probably all messed up. But with the system with the IHS is that, going back to that, is that, let's say I live in Martin, South Dakota. They have a hospital here, and Pine Ridge is for me is 48 miles away. So if and this is a true story, I'll use one of my situations. I had chest pains and it was snowing out. It was late at night, and I was having chest pains. So the IHS, Indian Health Service, has a policy saying that you have to be seen by Indian Health Service, or you have to go to the nearest Indian Health Service. Well, you know, sometimes they'll pay that if you go somewhere else. Well, anyway, I go to here in Bennett County, the hospital, they run tests, blah, blah, blah. And so I come back, you got 72 hours to report it. So I report it, and they send me a letter a month later saying that they're not going to pay for my visit here. You know, that's on my own. And so even if I did go to Indian Health Services in Pine Ridge, which is a hospital, they don't have the expertise or the knowledge to deal with maybe some more internal issues that are going on. So what they'll do is they'll call life flight. You know, they'll bring an airplane in. We have an airport there just a little ways, or they'll bring in an airplane, or they'll bring a helicopter. And then they'll send you off to Rapid City, one of the closer ones that do have the services and the expertise to take care of you. So, you know, this government funded, you know, program, IHS, is always being staffed by people that are coming in and out, in and out, in and out, you know, PAs, you know. I don't think I really ever seen a real doctor yet, but they come in and out, in and out. So next time you go visit, then they're like, okay, what's going on with you? So you got to tell your story all over again. Okay, let's say it has to do with something like, let's say one of the things, like your heart. They don't have the specialty there. They don't have it. So what happens is that if it's an extreme, you'll get sent out. But if something that they don't think is deemed as extreme, then they'll put in a referral to their board, and their board will look at it and say, he could live maybe a little bit longer, maybe not, but let's see what happens. If he comes back, then we'll do it. So we'll deny that referral to go see an expert. So then you get denied, and so you're not able to go see the real, like the heart doctors. So then what happens that, and this is my assumption, is that, and it happened to me, is that because they miss those diagnoses in the beginning, then it begins to build. The health continues to deteriorate when they could have dealt with it over here. And then, but when they finally get to a point where now we got to act, now they're spending more money. And then health services spending more money to have you go see the doctors. Now I went to the heart doctor, and then when I got done seeing them, then they said, well, you need to come back and see us again. So they set me an appointment. But I have to go back to IHS and see a provider to get that referral that they send to the board. And if it's approved, then I can go see the real doctors. So, so healthcare is one of the things that was given to us under treaties, healthcare and law enforcement and education. But it's like they had a good intent maybe back in the days of dealing with, you know, a lot of our health issues by giving us what people ought to see us as free healthcare. But technically, we in a sense we kind of pay for it, because when we go there, just like, you know, I don't know how many of you have been to the hospital, you know, to the doctors, you get your bill, and you're like, and I've seen mine. Okay, what? $5 for this aspirin they gave me? Damn, you know. Could just went down, got out of bed, went down to the store and got me some for less if they're gonna give me some aspirin. But so then the healthcare is there, but then if they run out of money funding before the end of their fiscal year, you know, you're just going to be walking out of a Tylenol, aspirin, or whatever, you know, because they don't have the funding to refer you out to the professional healthcare. So you're just going to have to sit on it and suffer, or do whatever you can to survive till they get the money, and then you get the referral, and then you go see the professional healthcare people that are specialized in doing that. Even if you do get there and they tell you to come back, you got to go through the referral process again to get back up there and see it. So, like say, for instance, you're in town, you got something happen real bad. Oh man, broke my leg, you know, stepped off something, broke my leg, and there's a hospital right there? Or do I travel 100 miles to the IHS? You know, what am I going to do here? You know, I'm in pain. I go here, and they're going to say, well, he could have, you know, bit the bullet and, you know, rode all the way to IHS, and then we could have, you know, sent you out on the airplane to professional care when they would have done the same thing there. So, you know, the healthcare system here is like a spider web of services on how, and sometimes they do treat well, but sometimes, most times they don't. So you just got to understand and negotiate that process, navigate that process in order to get real good healthcare. So I think that's why, you know, that you see a lot of our people here. We have a lot of heart disease, diabetes, obesity, you know, things like that going on. And so, you know, I think that a lot of these conditions could be found in the early stages and handled and dealt with, but then they don't have the resources, the money, the funding, or the experts in IHS to take that next step until, like I said, you know, your check engine light comes on your vehicle. You know, most of us, you know, I know a lot of us like me, and check engine light comes on. Oh, they all come on these cars, you know. We just keep going. And then next, you know, we're trying to pay for a new engine because it was something serious, you know. That's almost like the same example with healthcare, you know, our bodies, you know, our check engine light comes on, but we go to IHS, oh, here we'll just turn it off here with a couple Tylenols and ibuprofen or some prescription drugs, and they send you out the door not knowing, you know, it just building, you know, that part is, you know, building and falling apart until where it becomes, you know, terminal, you know, and then, you know, the worst of the worst happens, you know, you pass away. So, you know, so when, you know, talk about that piece of the Indian Health Service, the healthcare, yeah, I mean, I'm fighting with it right now with the Indian Health Services, and the tribe's fighting with it. And then they just now had a big meeting with the healthcare services from the U.S. government, Indian Health Service. I think about 5 tribes of this reservation of this state, South Dakota, all showed up and threw their the concerns out at them about, you know, our healthcare and providers. But you know what? You know, if, you know, I had the, you know, the money, you know, to do that, I'd get my own healthcare. I would, you know. Right now it's just, you know, IHS, you know, which again, we're afforded under the treaty, you know, so that's ours. So, you know, if it's something afforded to us by the treaty, then that's something that I'm going to do. You know, that's something that, you know, I'm going to use. You know, education, you know, that's, you know, another issue here on the reservation, and law enforcement. So, and even the healthcare, the food, the things that we eat, you know, that has come about to having to deal with a lot of these issues. So, but law enforcement, go back to law enforcement, has taught me a lot, you know, and with the classes and seeing what everything is going on around here. And so, you know, kind of got me into that area of supporting, you know, the Mini-Wachoni, you know, the pipeline, you know, the pipelines coming out of Canada and in North Dakota, and the uranium, you know, that mining that's going on, you know, they want to put in place, you know, just right off the reservation here, up in the Black Hills, you know. So it's got me to understand, you know, that piece, and to get you know, a lot of other people to understand that, you know, this is the only thing we have left is this reservation, you know, and we got to protect it, you know, one way or the other. And I think that the good thing is that what's happening is you start to see a lot of the more younger people, you know, stepping up and standing on the front lines. And when Trump came here during the, I think, 4th of July, you know, he came here during the 4th of July, you know, and Mount Rushmore, they used to have fireworks there all the time on top of the heads of those dudes there in Mount Rushmore, and they used to have fireworks there. And when I came down here every year, they used to have fireworks going off up there. you know, I went up there, you know, to see the fireworks, you know, but you know, I didn't know, you know, I went up there, I didn't know I was supposed to go up there and do patriotic things, you know. I mean, that's not, you know, wasn't part of it. It was like fireworks, you know, go see fireworks. But when Trump came, there was a group of protesters that went up there, you know, to, you know, protest his coming, and but also protest, you know, the continuation of the Black Hills, which, you know, legally, you know, set aside is still ours, and we got a chunk of change still sitting in the bank, you know, that they supposedly, you know, bought the Black Hills from, you know, the Lakotas, you know, the Dakotas, and but they refused to take the money, and so all that money is still sitting in the bank, just building up interest, and just sitting there. So in other words, the tribe here has said, you know, we never sold the Black Hills, you know, we never sold it. So that's why they don't. They feel that by not accepting that money, is that they never sold it. So so that the people that I've seen, you know, are getting a little bit more younger, that are getting out there, which is good, you know, because it's a new generation of people going out there, you know, stand up, you know, against racism. That's a big thing now, you know, racism, you know, and protecting, you know, the land, you know, and protecting what's going to be, you know, the future of our people, you know, that's going to be here, and things like that. And um, anyway, Bennett County, where I stay, the other day, about a month ago, made it a Second Amendment sanctuary state. You know, the county, Bennett County, you know, their board made it a sanctuary to protect their Second Amendment. Now, I mean, like, you know, I was common sense, you know, but why would you announce, or why would you even do that? You know, why would you announce? Why would you even do, like, oh, this is a sanctuary state, you know, we're going to protect our Second Amendment rights, so nobody comes in and takes our guns. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? You know, I mean, me with common sense, you know, if I got a gun, most likely, you know, it's gonna feed my family. You know, it's gonna feed my family. And I even hate, probably if I had cows or whatever, you know, shooting varmints, you know, coyotes and stuff like that, you know. But that's what it's gonna mean to me, you know, that and I never even knew about Second Amendment rights, even being a police officer. What's Second Amendment? Oh, it's right to have a gun. Oh, really? You know, back when I was growing up in Wyoming, we had gun racks in our trucks. We had guns. We had guns just sitting out on the dash, handguns. We just drive around, go to the store, walk in, go get ourselves, come out, guns. Nobody thought about nothing. Nobody thought, oh shit, sorry, you know, call the cops. You know, that guy's got a gun over there. You know, do something. You know, nobody thought about that. We'd go up and visit. What you got there, man? Oh, that's a 30-06. Just bought it the other day. Really? Let me check it out. Get it out at the store. Look at it. Point it around. Nothing. Nobody said nothing, because it was natural. You know what I mean? Natural. That's what it was about. Then I don't know where it all changed. You guys maybe have an answer to that, but I don't know where it all changed, where all this stuff is now like, oh, we got to protect our gun rights. You know, we got to be a sanctuary state. You know, we got to do this. We got to do that. I mean, like, what? You know, all this stuff is so, you know, crazy. And now even more with this thing going on with this George Floyd, you know, law enforcement, you know, when I was being in law enforcement for 18 years, seeing that, you know, only had to watch it one time. That's it. And I seen, oh man, you know, and so, I mean, we had all our trainings, we had everything, you know, everything they discussed on there, we had all that. We know the do's and don'ts about, you know, authority or use of force and stuff like that. I only had to use it, you know, watch it one time. But now it gets to that point, well, where's it going? You know, what's happening? You know, we're to a point where, you know, we're protesting in the streets, you know, and things like that. And okay, now with Minneapolis, there was a tourist, I think from Australia, a couple years ago, and the first Native American woman chief of police was hired in Minneapolis. And this lady from Australia, she reports something going on. So these two cops pull in with their lights off. So she jumps up to the driver's side door. Hey, and the guy from the passenger side reaches across and shoots her and kills her. And as a result of that, you know, they fire that chief, that Native American female. They fire her. But with this one here, with this one going on, man, the guy's still there. You know, I mean, I'm like, you know, now where's the justice in that? You know, you fire the Native American, you know, female, you know, for that incident there, you know, and but then this big situation going on, you know, it's a different. But you know, just with the Asians, the Asian Americans watching that on TV going on, I'm like, what's that all about? You know, what's that all about? It's like, do we take a step back? You know, if they're blaming them for this virus, then do we step back and start blaming people for, you know, for cholera, smallpox, tuberculosis? You know, who do we blame for that? You know, there's somebody to blame there for that, but we're not going there. You know, but you know, that doesn't make any sense to me either. It really doesn't. But I think the way the world is going today, and how, you know, the politics were set up, you know, to change a lot of things that are going on out there. I mean, it just makes me wonder right now is that, you know, almost going back to my childhood, going into a store, you know, going into a gathering where there's primarily, you know, non-Indians, you know, wondering what my grandkids are going through in these schools. So I guess you can see what I mean, going back, you know, to my childhood, experiencing all this. Now am I, you know, starting to relive this again, you know, watching my back or waiting for it to happen to Native Americans now. You know what I mean? You know, it's happened to the blacks, it's happened to the Asians, you know, now who's next? You know, what's the next ethnic group that's going to get hit? You know, and about a month ago too, we had on the reservation boards, we have our signs, welcome to the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. You know, we have those on our reservation, on our borders. And somebody decides to put swastika stickers and everything up on one of our signs, and, you know, F Biden, you know, things like that. You know, they spray painted it up, vandalized it, you know, and I don't know if they, you know, to me, I'm like, we know you're there, but, you know, hell, you don't have to vandalize our sign about it, you know. But, you know, so it's almost like, you know, wondering and waiting and seeing if anything is going to go on, you know, and do we need to step up again to start protecting our families, you know, our homes and stuff like that, because we do know for a fact right now that, you know, we don't have an edge on the state of South Dakota. You know, the governor, I mean, you know, a lot of her stuff is first of all, with the COVID, you know, she didn't address anything about COVID, but just kind of let the thing kind of run rampant, you know. Just kind of ended up killing a lot of people here, this COVID, and she never really took any steps to deal with it and address it. So I mean, and with our borders, you know, being mad at the reservations for putting up their own borders, you know, arguing whether it's state road, federal road, county road, whatever, you know, and getting mad, and, you know, at one time trying to threaten the tribes. But so, you know, we just, and now with the pipeline, you know, with Biden, you know, putting a halt to it, now it's going to be coming up here again, whether or not he's going to truly put a true halt to that pipeline is what we're going to see. I mean, and what's going to happen behind that. And then now with, was it baseball? Because of the voting? I mean, even voting, you know, like I voted this year, you know, when I went to this voting place, They said, "Oh, you don't vote here, even though I lived here. You got to go vote over there." So I went and voted over there, filled out all the paperwork, and submitted my vote. So what? It's no biggie. And I'm like, man, that suppression stuff must be worse somewhere else. It must be really bad because I just doesn't matter what the situation is going to be, is that I'm going to get my stuff done. I'm going to get my stuff done and also educate those around me on how it should be done. So I don't know what time we're supposed to crank off here, but I'll go ahead, and if you have any questions, I'll go ahead and open that up, I guess, here, or if Keller and Leah has something.
Hey, thanks a lot, Milton. Really appreciate your time. Yeah, I found so much of what you said so fascinating, all the way from preventative medicine to police jurisdiction and tribal police not having jurisdiction over white folks, all the way to Kristi Noem kind of inviting people to Sturgis and spreading COVID around. A lot of really interesting stuff. I really appreciate your time and you enlightening us about what's going on there in Indian country. I guess I can turn it over to Nick for a moment for questions or breakout session. You can kind of let us know what's best for you next, Nick. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're going to forego the breakout rooms for today and just go into like a Q&A. If anybody has any specific questions for Milton, we can go ahead and open that up.
Milton, thanks so much again for sharing your stories today. I'm really curious about Senator Deb Haaland and what the mood is about her becoming the new secretary in Lakota country right now.
Well, I think in the beginning I was, I always was kind of, on the side, happy to see that there was some, representation, up there, in the big house, And then when she became we're, trying to get in as Secretary of Interior, and then I was hoping, that I knew she was going to go up against some opposition, but I was hoping that she would get in there. Then after, she did get in there, then I started thinking about, how much is she going to go right in and start, putting up her own policies, protecting, tribal lands, protecting, lands that do have, maybe grave sites or artifacts and things like that. She can go out there and even protect animals, grizzlies, wolves, and all these other things. I was wondering if she's just going to jump in or hit it real hard, right away and get it, go with it, or is she going to test the waters and start out with, some areas that I guess really need to be looked at as far as, protecting, those land bases, that I guess originally, were, possibly tribal lands, or protecting the artifacts of, these places that the tribes, consider sacred, and other people don't. I think that's the big difference, is that, like myself, other people probably got up around here the other day and just kind of heard the thunder and lightning and just said, oh, it's thundering lightning. But they didn't have, like what I felt, went out there knowing that, man, I'm alive, I made it another year, and had all these things going on, and doing my little ceremony here. But I think that, with her direction, I'm just kind of real excited to see how she's going to address, the pipeline, how she's going to address, I know there's some issues going down south down there. I think somewhere, Arizona, somewhere, there's some land that's being, supposed to be, tore up because, they need to, build, I think, the wall through that area, things like that. So, I'm kind of excited to see how she's going to go against this, but, but I understand, and I think like other people understand that, she's up against a lot. The bottom line and is love makes the world go around. It doesn't. Money. This morning I was watching TV, they're talking about was it 15 or 20 billionaires now. You know, it was good to be a millionaire, but now they're, you know, what's next, zillionaires or what? But, you know, but, and I'm thinking, man, where'd they make all their money? We were COVID, we were shut down. You know, how'd this even happen? But, you know, I'm kind of excited about her, you know, being in there, and hopefully, you know, she does, you know, a lot of face-to-face, one-on-one consultations with tribes, you know, to see what the real issues are, you know, and how she could, you know, develop policies with the tribes to protect, you know, the land base and, you know, things like that. But I was surprised the other day. I said, I saw a big parade on TV. Did you guys see a parade on TV over somewhere in Egypt or somewhere? They were had this parade of mummies. I'm like, who digs up bodies and parades them downtown? That would just like be like you and I going out here finding the oldest grave in the city cemetery, digging them up, pulling their coffins up, and, you know, going downtown with them. I know. I think it's this thought process of different people. You know, that's what I thought. Like, why are they even doing that? It's crazy. But yeah, I think she will. She has an uphill battle, but I think she has a good heart, you know, and to go out there and protect the resources.
Milt, I have another question for you. You mentioned Mount Rushmore earlier. And, you know, like, so the tribe hasn't cashed the check. The money's still in the bank. Like, technically, they haven't actually sold it. I think Supreme Court's actually ruled that it's tribal land. I don't know if you can speak for the tribe, but like, what would you see as like an ideal solution to Mount Rushmore? Like, would you just blow those faces off of there, or what? How would you guys handle that?
I mean, I think that would be something that I think a lot of tribes, you know, radically would say, just blow them up, you know. But on the other hand, what I always thought, and what I always teach my grandkids and my relatives from Wyoming, and when they come down to visit me, even my brothers and sisters in Wyoming, and they come to visit me and they come to my house here, and I say, all right, well, let's go on our field trip tomorrow. Where do you guys want to go? Mount Rushmore. You know, I'm like, why? What? You don't go to Mount Rushmore? No, why? And they're like, well, South Dakota, Mount Rushmore. I said, what's there to see? I said, you guys go up there and see this big face made out of stone, but you don't see the stolen land. You don't see the blood of our people that died for these faces to be up there. And you don't understand that each one of these faces represents some type of atrocities that they committed on Native people. That's what you don't see. And then right away, wow, bro, you're pretty radical, you know? So, you know, even them, you know, kind of, you know, have a different thought process about Mount Rushmore. But, you know, myself, I would always say, like I educate my grandkids, is what those faces represent. You know what I mean? I mean, it's almost going to be like almost impossible to go up and, you know, totally take that thing down, you know, destroy it. So the thing is that to educate them on the wrongs that they all committed against Native Americans, and set something up, like people were setting up these little Trump booths here and there, but to go up and set up, you know, these booths, these things about every one of these, you know, and how the land was taken, you know, when traditionally it was ours, until somebody stumbled up there. You know, they weren't even supposed to be in that area because the treaty said that no white settler could come into, you know, Indian territory. They couldn't come in at all. But somebody snuck in there, got into the Black Hills, and came out with a pocket full of gold. And that was history. You know, then you had old Custer, you know, leading the charge. And I think that, you know, with the history of our tribe going back, you know, I think ever since, you know, and I always thought about it that way, the defeat of Custer, you know, it was always, you know, you know, the downfall, you know, of a lot of tribes, you know, end up having to be rounded up and put on reservations, you know. But yeah, I mean, I think the education, like you educate my grandchildren when we go through, I mean, we go to the hills. We just went to the hills the other day, right before the storm. We were up there. We went to Wind Cave, you know, mark that down, you know, Google it, look at it, read it. But we went to Wind Cave, and I told them, you know, the story about Wind Cave, why we're here, why we're doing this, this is going on. And when we got on the road, and I said, okay, what's the story about Wind Cave? And they would kind of tell me, but I'd help them. That's what we're going to have to change, change these things, is to educate. And so, like with my grandkids, I'm talking about, Wind Cave and the origins of our people, the origins of people. This is where we came from. This is who we are. But in the other world, it's like storytelling. It's mythology. It's not about, no, the Bible said, or, the dinosaur said, this is where we came from. But, that's kind of excluded on where we actually came from. So I think, educating, that's the way I look at it, is educating about the four heads that are up there, what it represents. Does it really represent, proud to be American? I think that, for us as natives, we have to really reevaluate that process on what that really represents. And I think it's getting there. I think it's getting there. My sister came down one time, my other sister, and she took my grandson, and I educated him on the history of Mount Rushmore and the way I could educate him. And so he went with them and their sons, and they were going up there, and he told my sister, says, we don't come here. These are goons. He called them goons. And said, we don't come here. We don't come see the goons. And my sister said, what? And she's married to a non-Indian guy. And what? No, we don't come here at all. Why? And he kind of gave him what he remembered to her. And then said, okay, well, I guess we're not seeing Mount Rushmore. And they went on to Crazy Horse Mountain. So I mean, that's the way it's going to have to happen. It's educating, what they really truly represent. And it's not going to, the education piece can't be, next month, maybe one time next month, maybe one time the month after that, but it's got to be consistent, where it becomes a story that is repeated and understood. And I don't understand why we don't buy land up there anyway. If you ever been to Black Hills, man, across every creek, around every corner, across every hilltop, somebody's building a home. Log homes, $100,000 homes. I'm like, how is this happening? How is this happening? And in the Black Hills right now, there's a big issue going on up there about this logging company. There's going to be 100 jobs lost because, there's no more trees. Duh. Who would have figured that? Black Hills ain't that big, ain't that much. But yeah, if your resources is timber, and you're cutting down 50, 100-year-old trees, and takes about that long to grow, and you're going on there ripping and cutting and building permits in Rapid City is at an all-time high. Where do you think the lumber is going to be coming from? Don't you think it's going to run out sooner or later? It's going to run out. But anyway, that's why I think educating.
No, we have some questions in the chat box. I don't know if you can see those.
Okay.
Maybe you could read one or two, Nick. I'm not sure Milt has access.
Do you want me to read my question?
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Milton.
Hi.
At the university, there was a book club sponsored by the Office of Equity and Diversity recently, and I was one of the people that participated in that, and we read the book Winter Counts. Are you familiar with that? Because many of the places that you're talking about it was set not on Pine Ridge Reservation, but a smaller reservation, and references a lot of the places that you've been talking about and where you live.
Yeah, actually, I never read the book, or I'm reading this guy David Asawambli. I never really heard of him either. But if it ain't on Facebook, I'm not going to read it. No.
Well,
But yeah, I see the other parts then, and your thoughts about the author discusses tribal versus state jurisdiction. Yeah, I think
he talks about it quite a bit, and it's a novel, but he is the person who is sort of an unofficial law enforcer on the tribal on the reservation, because, as you were saying earlier, the state doesn't provide, and because the jurisdiction for the state versus where it is versus the reservation is so different, and the two don't cross.
yeah, I think after the 70s, what I've read a lot, understood about, I don't know if you a lot of you have read about the 70s when AIM, American Indian Movement, came here and held their, I think, 76-day siege out at Wounded Knee, and then they even stormed the Custer courthouse over Yellow Thunder being murdered down in Nebraska, and but a lot of that changed after that. Where like I said, we went from a federal law enforcement agency, BIA, to tribal law enforcement. Now we're called the Oglala Sioux Tribe Department of Public Safety, which I was part of for 18 years here on the reservation, where started out as a patrolman, sergeant, lieutenant, and finished out as the captain of police that overseeing everything here on Pine Ridge. So, I mean, that's one of the good things is that, we stood up and we defended the jurisdiction of this tribe by not allowing, the state to come in here anymore. And the feds, they do every once in a while flex their muscle and say, and this is where sovereignty, those of you that understand what the definitions of sovereignty, we truly don't really meet the definition of sovereignty, because we are funded by the government, and because we have numbers by the government, and a lot of our funding comes from the government, and we are under the government, then the feds will sometimes flex their muscle and say, we have total exclusive jurisdiction over you. And if you can read Ex parte Crow Dog, that's where that all came, where our traditional way of dealing with issues internally in our tribes came to an end with Ex parte Crow Dog, where he had a dispute over a woman, and so Crow Dog, ended up shooting Spotted Tail, and then the state came in and took over and wanted to hang Crow Dog in Deadwood, and then the feds opened up their eyes, realized, hey, these guys are under our jurisdiction. You can't do that. So then they fought the state and got Crow Dog back under the federal jurisdiction. Other than that, he would have, probably would have hung in Deadwood. But they took him and brought him back, and that's where the state established their authority and jurisdiction over a lot of the tribal nations. But you do actually have states, some in California, some in Nebraska, that are in Washington, Oregon, I think, that are 280 states. We call them 638 states and 280 states jurisdiction, where the state has jurisdiction along with the tribe on their reservation on how they apply and enforce the laws.
Hey Milton, we have one last question, and we have like less than a minute left, so you'll have to give a brief answer to what is a pretty broad question. So how can those of us out here help to make a change, meaning folks not on the res, non-Indigenous people? What can we do to help make progress?
Well, I think one of the things is that, what I've learned in my life, having to make change, was that I had to go out there outside this reservation to understand that process in order to make change. To live in both worlds, to understand both their laws and policies in both worlds. So I think that, what you guys can bring, and I know Keller and them, one of the things that, that when they put us on reservations, you know, we're hunter gatherers, as they say. You know, we go out, you know, gather berries, and we go out hunt buffalo, elk, deer to feed our families. But, you know, nowhere in the pictures or somebody put up here a winter count showing us guys standing around with a hoe in our hand, or, you know, buffalo pulling a plow, you know, planting corn and stuff like that. You know, you don't see any of that, you know. So what Keller and them brought was that, you know, this alternative type stuff, and building these gardens, in which, you know, a lot of us natives, you know, were really, you know, I guess, have a hard time dealing with, you know, greens and stuff like that and all that. But then the way they presented it, the way that, you know, I can give you a carrot, I can give you celery, I can give you this and that, but you're going to look at it, most times we're like, oh, I'm not going to eat that. But if you present it in a way that you can fix it, and it's going to be something that's going to be likable and tasteable to that person, then you're going to do it. And then that's what they did. You know, for, you know, a few years there, you know, they're growing these gardens, and man, you know, the food and the vegetables, the way Leah prepared them and stuff like that, you know, man, we were eating them every time with everything, you know. So I think what you guys can bring is understanding, you know. I really truly believe, you know, the policies, the laws and stuff out there, how can we integrate our children, our young ones out there, what to watch for, what to look for, instead of stumbling into them and getting into trouble or not knowing which way to go. Or because we get shamed a lot, you know. So when we get shamed a lot, you know, growing up, our response to that is being angry, being mad. When we get shamed, you know, we get mad, you know, we don't listen, you know. We want to listen where maybe there is something behind that, but it's not really shame, but we take it as shame, and we get mad, and we don't listen, and we give it up, and we don't do it anymore. So I think it's something that, you know, you guys can bring here to prepare. And I think Keller had something going good one time, is and what I always believe, because we have a shortage of housing here, is to bring things like plumbing, carpentry, you know, give some of these young men and women here. You never know, one of them might become, you know, the best bricklayer, best carpenter, best plumber. You know, those things, you know, we could, you know, I know that we could use a lot of just the basic skills, so they can take those skills and do something, because of the resources are right here. Resources we have for that.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Milton. I think we are out of time for today. I want to take this opportunity, thank Milton, thank Leah and Keller for coming on the call today. It was really great and informative. Thank you to Dennis for hosting this. Brandon, Dennis, any final words before we part?
Many thanks to all, Milton especially. Wonderful listening to your knowledge, your stories, your shared experiences over the years. Next week, we're going to head to Parkland, Florida, and meet with a gentleman named Matt Deitch, who was the co-founder of March for Our Lives, after the aftermath of the Parkland massacre.
Agreed. Thank you all. Really appreciate it. And just FYI, we have some contact information for the Pine Ridge folks on our website as well. If you'd like to continue the conversation and connect virtually, please check that out. So thank you all.
Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone.
All right,
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.